you. Malcolm, I have to go to you first because July 27, 2016, it's that significant date when Donald Trump gave that press conference. Russia, if you're listening, the indictment then states that the conspirators who are indicted now, that on July 27th, that same day attempted after hours to spearfish for the first time email accounts at a domain name hosted by a third-party provider and used by Clinton's personal office. Literally the same day. You were on our show that weekend after that happened, discussing really what we're all looking at now. What, in your view, is the significance of now getting this information into an indictment?
Well, what the indictment does is it solidifies into the justice system a lot of intelligence that we knew had to exist. You recall I wrote a book just a few weeks after that where I projected these teams existed and what their manpower, strength, and operations would be. And boom, they exist. And we know they exist now, right down to the names of the individuals who went in on the mid-watch section and actually started drafting the emails and documents to support Donald Trump's contention from the day before. You know, we've talked about this a lot on this show.
Yes.
About, is Trump a witting asset of Russia, an unwitting asset? Clearly, on that day, he became a witting asset. He knew Russia was working in his interest, and he tasked them out to a certain extent with orders. Russia picked up that mantle, they executed those orders, and there are other examples that occurred all throughout August and September on releases on state documents right after Trump made speeches. So this is really that intelligence that I've warned you about existed out there turning into evidence, and here we are.
Absolutely. And Nick Akerman, so there's a lot in this indictment if people haven't read it yet. But so one of the enduring kind of questions that is in the minds of people are who are the Americans that these Russian intelligence officers, either in their own regard or when they created this Guccifer 2.0 pretend, person to sort of pawn off what they were doing onto. So let's go back to the timeline really quick. This is element 11 for my producers. You have this timeline that in March, the Russians start getting access to John Podesta's emails. Then in June, there's that Trump Tower meeting with the Kremlin-connected lawyer where he promises dirt on Hillary Clinton. On July 21st, Donald Trump gives his RNC acceptance speech. July 22nd, stolen emails from the DNC start to come out. You have July 25th, the Democratic convention begins. Then you have July 27th, Trump says, Russia, if you're listening, they start trying to go after Clinton's personal server. And then in October, you've got Julian Assange, et cetera. But in between that timeline that you're seeing up there, we're showing the timeline. Right. In between that time, in June, when the DNC finally, they know that they've been attacked. They announce that their servers have been hacked. They say publicly. Then the Russian intelligence operatives shift their strategy. They create, on or about June 14, 2016, the DNC through company publicly announces that it had been hacked by Russian government actors. In response, the conspirators created the online persona Guccifer 2.0 and falsely claimed to be a lone Romanian hacker to undermine the allegations of Russian responsibility. Guccifer 2.0 then starts talking to people as if it's the hacker. They talk to a candidate for U.S. Congress. They talk to a person in regular contact with senior members of the Trump campaign. They talk to a U.S. reporter. Are those Americans also in jeopardy of being indicted?
Oh, they very well could be. I mean, this indictment, the crime that is charged here is conspiracy.
Right.
A conspiracy is an agreement to commit a crime.
Right.
The scope of that crime, as charged in this indictment, not only is the hacking into the DNC and the theft of the documents, but it's the staging of those documents and using those documents to help Donald Trump get elected.
Yep.
And there is no way that these documents, which were so fine-tuned and released on very specific times. For example, one of the items that you didn't mention was the release of certain of these documents after the Hollywood Access tape.
Right.
I mean, what you had was the Trump campaign using the Russians as what would normally be called a boiler room operation, which is set up to basically rebut allegations that go out there from the other side. So there you have the Russians doing it. There is no way, no how, that the Russians would have enough political sense and have enough feel for what the game on the ground is without having spotters and people in the Trump campaign directing this.
Yeah.
And if you look at this indictment, it is filled with incredible details about the Russians. I mean, this is not gathered just based on forensic evidence.
Sure.
And they know who the Americans are. They know who's going to be indicted, and they're in the process now of putting that evidence together so they can convict these people beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, and so Naveed, having worked as a double agent, dealt with the Russians as well, I want to get your commentary on the way this would work. So they get caught. The intelligence officers then pretend to be this person, Guccifer 2.0, who poses as, I think, a Romanian lone hacker, so that they can say that this is the person doing it and this is who's communicating with the Americans. So you have Guccifer communicating, according to the indictment, with somebody in regular contact with senior members of the Trump campaign. There's been speculation that that is Roger Stone. The conspirators posing as Guccifer 2.0 communicated with U.S. persons about the release of stolen documents. They wrote to a person who was in regular contact with senior members of the presidential campaign, Donald J. Trump. Roger Stone, last night on CNN, responded to the idea that he might be that U.S. person. Take a listen.
I certainly acknowledge that I was in touch with Trump campaign officials, and I have testified under oath to the House Intelligence Committee that I certainly had a 24-word exchange with the persona Guccifer 2.0 over Twitter.
It's
in
also
retrospect, I think I probably am the person referred to. The reason I'm not charged in this indictment is because I received nothing from the defendants. I passed nothing on from the defendants. There's no evidence of collusion or conspiracy or coordination.
So Naveed, how would that normally work? If Guccifer 2.0 has now somebody who's in regular contact with the campaign, would they be as blatant as passing documents to him? Or revealing in some way who they are?
I think that is to kind of go with what Nick was saying. Is I think what we're seeing with this indictment is support elements. We have yet to see the main act. And look, I worked with Against the GRU specifically, and I can tell you, Joy, that unequivocally the GRU, Russian intelligence, the crown jewels of any intelligence service, but specifically the Russians, are people. What we're seeing here with the idea of coordination, where Donald Trump goes on TV and then they start hacking Hillary Clinton's email, that coordination didn't happen in that moment. That coordination, that agreement, that discussion, the command and control, all the elements that to be into place to decide to do that happened long before. That would have required human contact. That would have required some level of coordination. That doesn't happen with Guccifer and Roger Stone. That happens with human beings talking to each other. Joy, I am absolutely convinced, even more so today, after reading this indictment, that there are Americans who are involved, and that will be the third act, that there is going to be evidence, and where Mueller is driving is we are going to find that there's not unwitting assets, but there were Americans who actually aided the Russians in harming the United States by interfering with our election, or were acting under direction by the Russian intelligence. And that's the end point, Joy. You're asking about how this would work. The Russians only get into a room with someone with two reasons, knowing two things about them. One, that they have something of worth that is of worth to Russia, and the second is the belief that they can fully control that person. I suspect we're going to find people that fit those two bills.
Wow. And Sarah Kendzior, not just Americans, because you also have Organization One, thought to be WikiLeaks. This is a non-American organization that, according to the indictment, a message gets sent to Guccifer 2.0. I'm going to read a little bit more from this indictment. On or about June 22nd, 2016, Organization One sent a private message to Guccifer 2.0 to send any new material stolen from the DNC here for us to review. And it will have a much higher impact than what you are doing, releasing yourselves. On or about July 6, 2016, Organization One added, if you have anything Hillary related, we want it in the next 2 days, preferable, because the DNC, Democratic National Convention, is approaching, and she will solidify Bernie supporters behind her after. The conspirators responded, okay, I see. Organization One then explains, we think Trump has only a 25% chance of winning against Hillary, so conflict between Bernie and Hillary is interesting. So now you have this Organization One, who could be WikiLeaks, actively saying, give us the information so we can use it to split Bernie and Hillary Democrats at the convention. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that that's surprising. I mean, I think they were trying to exacerbate all sorts of divisions and tensions within American society, and that includes within the Democratic Party. I think the framing of that email, however, was aimed at targeting the person in question and possibly, trying in some sense to cover their tracks, that this was actually coming from the Kremlin and not from WikiLeaks. I don't think that they thought Hillary had a small chance of losing this election. I think they knew that Trump was very likely to win this election because they've been putting all sorts of things into play to ensure that this is possible. This was a multi-year plan. They've been working at this goal for a long time. So I think that this was just a way to kind of give cover to this story. I mean, it genuinely did exacerbate tensions, but it was also something that people could point to after the election had happened and said, oh, Hillary wasn't able, to gain the support of Sanders voters, which actually isn't true. The majority of Sanders supporters did vote for Hillary in the end. But it's something that they could use to be a bit more plausible.
Absolutely. Nick, I'm going to come back to you on this because the other thing that really frightens people when they think about what happened with the election, and it doesn't come up much, and it's constantly denied for some reason by the FBI, and I'm going to ask all the panelists about it, but the idea that they also accessed boards of elections information.
Well, that's
so
right.
You have, to read just really quick from the indictment, in or around July 2016, Kovalev, who's one of the indicted people, and his co-conspirators hacked the website of a state board of elections and stole information related to approximately 500,000 voters, including names, addresses, partial social security numbers, dates of birth, driver's license numbers. In or around August 2016, Kovalev and his co-conspirators hacked into the computers of a U.S. vendor that supplied software used to verify voter registration information in the 2016 election. That's what people are afraid of, that is ongoing, and 2016 is coming up. They hacked the DCCC, which is congressional elections, which are coming up, and that they got into the voter rolls.
Yeah, Joy, it's even worse than that, because what you're not seeing in that indictment is the FBI's and the investigators' inability to really understand what the Russians did once they got into these systems. We're dealing with state systems. We're dealing with computer systems that aren't very good at creating audit trails.
Right.
So you don't really know in a lot of these systems. A lot of companies don't have this, where you can actually tell when someone hacks in, what did they look at, what did they manipulate, what did they take. We do not know, and it's certainly not going to show up in this indictment, and I don't think the investigators can give us an answer to this as to whether or not they changed voting rolls, whether or not they changed votes. We don't know.
Or could do it again.
Well, they can do it all again, exactly. And the problem is the states are not doing anything about their computer systems. The federal government is not doing anything about the computer systems. There is no one organizing this in a way that protects the sanctity of our voting in this country.
Very quickly, Naveed, Donald Trump again is denying, he tweeted today blaming it on the Obama administration. They're saying the indictment took place. I'm not going to read his tweet, but he's blaming it on the Obama administration. That is now the tack that he's trying to take. What is your take on that? Because I seem to recall Mitch McConnell saying hell no to any joint statement from Democrats and Republicans at the time in October of 2016 when the Obama administration wanted to go public and warn Americans.
Yeah, I mean, look, Donald Trump is going to say anything to get out under from this, but there is a point here with the specificity that was in the Mueller indictment. One of the things that does concern me is if we knew this level of detail, it is a legitimate question to ask, why couldn't we stop it? And Joy, it concerns me that we're stuck in this partisanship because of Donald Trump, that we can't ask that question, that, there's been no money spent on increasing counterintelligence, there's been no increase in manpower. These are legitimate questions. These are questions that should be asked in a nonpartisan, objective way, and the American public is owed an answer. But to say that Obama somehow caused this is frankly absurd, especially when Donald Trump is taking that meeting in a couple of days.
Let's remember the same party that is now talking about impeaching Rod Rosenstein actively refused to allow a bipartisan warning to the American people. They at minimum were not willing to stop it actively.
Instead, they're going after an FBI agent over his personal email. That's what they're spending their time on.
I think what people want to know, Nick, do you expect Americans to be indicted? Very quickly.
I absolutely do. I think this is a precursor. This is a coming attraction, and I guarantee you it's just a matter of time before Robert Mueller gets his ducks in a row and you see another indictment on the same conspiracy, but this time it's going to be the Americans.
Wow, and definitely we will say too. Nick Akerman, Malcolm, thank you very much, Nick. Malcolm, Sarah, and Naveed will be